Hello everyone, this is Melanie and I am here today with a tutorial on all three sets of the new Melanie B's custom paintbrushes. So I have the three 5-piece paintbrush sets. I have the detail set, the flat brush set, and the blending set. And I'm going to paint on this custom painting that I brought to you guys from Canvas by Numbers back a couple of months ago, and I have been working on this and I'm trying to get it finished up, and I thought what better painting to work on and to show you how to use these paintbrushes than this one underneath these brushes. And I don't want to show it to you yet. I will show it to you here momentarily, but I have so many detail areas in here that would be perfect to demonstrate the tiny detail brushes in this set. I also have lots of larger openings for showing you how I use my flat brushes. And then I also have tons of blending for skin that would be ideal for showing you how to use the blending set. So that's what we're going to do today. And this video I might end up actually separating into different sections just to divide it up into each set of paintbrushes if it gets too long, so that I can show you each set individually. I will kind of play that by ear. Now let me move these away and I'm going to show you why my face needs blending. I'm coming pretty close to being done with this overall painting. Most of the time I finish a piece before I do the blending just to make sure I have enough paint, but it looks like I'm gonna have plenty of paint. So I did use the blending set to do a little playing when I first got them. Did some blending down here in this special place, and and over here, which you cannot really see, I've done a little blending on my hand on that side. But you can see I definitely have a lot of blending to do on my face because there are some major patches. So instead of going ahead and doing the blending on my own, I'm gonna do that for this video. And that way I can show you how to use the blending brushes, because they are going to be really easy once you know how to use the set that I created. We're gonna take the opportunity to paint together, but at the same time, I'm gonna show you how to get the most out of the sets of brushes that I've designed and why specifically they're for Paint by Numbers. Now, these brushes can be used for every kind of painting there is, but specifically and exclusively, these were designed for my Paint by Number enthusiasts because we have these little tiny openings that are impossible to get into with long bristles. And we hold our brushes super close like a pencil. So we need the control, and these tiny openings, those are the ones that I want to show you the detail set with. I want to show you the products that I'm using off camera so that you'll know what I'm doing when you're not able to see. That way, when I list the items below, you will know exactly what they're for. So I'm gonna bring them up here real quick in front of the camera, show you what I have, and then I'm putting them away. You'll have links to those items below. So I already have my brushes out of the packages, and they are all here individually. I will be pulling them from these containers. This is the storage tube. It is out of stock on the website right now, but they will be back in stock soon. I also already have my sets of brushes separated. As I work, I will be telling you which brush I'm using. In addition, I have 2 of the rainbow bottles that I have diluted flow aid and regular flow aid in. Those are going to be over here in case I need them for my paint. I also have 2 of the new rinse cups over here to the side with water in them, and I have each of the stainless steel stir sticks as well so that I can keep my paintbrushes clean while I'm working. I like to keep those over here on the right side, so I'm going to kind of readjust since I am right-handed. I will be using one of these wipes to reshape the paintbrush bristles back into the perfect point every single time I rinse my brushes, and that will be either sitting here or over here out of the view of the camera. But every single time I rinse my brush, I run the bristles across this wipe and get it back into the point. And that is how I maintain my bristles and use the same paintbrushes for a very long time. Today I'm also going to be using the new stainless steel mixing palette or blending palettes that are available, and that's what I'm going to be using when I go in to blend to mix the paints, and I'm going to just keep that handy. I also have my bucket of paints here that will be out of sight. I have my swatch guides that I have filled out before I started my painting, because when I go to blend my face, since I cannot see the numbers anymore, I will have my reference guide and I have my swatch guide that will help me go back and know which paints I need to use to go in for blending. So I'll have those handy as well, and I'll explain more of that once I get to the blending process. So let me get everything set up and I'll be right back and we'll get started painting. So I'm going to start with a couple of the little bit of larger areas, which there's not a ton of those in my hair. I have color and highlights in my hair, and with the sun, the way it was hitting that day, there were a lot of colors, and that is why you see so much detail, so many different colors, and so much going on in my hair alone here. So I thought what I would do is start with the flat brushes and just work in some of the larger areas. So I'm going to go into this particular cell with the flat number 1 out of the 5-piece flat brush set. I'm back in a flare up, so I'm going to apologize in advance if I'm losing my voice the entire time I'm trying to record this. Anyway, here we go. Now, when I'm using a flat brush, I use it with the flat side, like you would imagine, right? But I'm also using it by sliding it on its edge to outline. When I get into smaller areas, or if I get to a point where I need to make the brush thinner, I can turn it on the point and get a tiny line. Do you see what I'm doing here? So the flat brushes are super versatile. If you have not seen my video about how to avoid streaky paints, flat brushes are the key. So you're going to notice I'm going around all these little unusual, odd shapes with this flat brush. I'm not using the detail brush like a lot of people would be doing, or the spotter, or the round. And I'm smoothing with the flat side, and I'm lining with the long side. And if I go over to the next line and to the next color, I'm not worried about it, you guys. Who knew where that line was? It does not matter. There aren't line police out there that are saying, oh my gosh, she went into the next line. Woo, woo, or whatever the sirens are for police. And if there are, tell them to mind their own damn. Mind your business. So you can notice I'm still kind of coming sideways. You have not seen me pull this way. I've been pulling from the side almost the entire time. But look how quickly that cell got filled in. And how smooth that looks. And that's done. So while I have this brush, while I have this color, there's a cell here. Now, this brush looks so big for that. A lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, you're not gonna switch to a smaller brush. I don't, because I don't have to. If you feel comfortable using a smaller brush, you absolutely could. I'm going to go ahead and use the brush that I have and fill this one in. But I am going to show you how I use all of the flat brushes, because there are some amazing ones in this set. And they all serve a different purpose. So that one is done. Now I can continue, because these are all kind of like one big cell. See how I just turn the brush and manipulate it? Now, I really honestly think this paint probably could use some flow aid. If the paint has flow aid, you see how my bristles are kind of spreading apart right here? That has more to do with this paint being thick and not having any flow aid in it, not being creamy enough. That's why you're noticing that separation in the bristles. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush and come back in here. I wiped it on the cosmetic wipe so you can see my bristles are perfect again. And I'll go ahead and finish using this particular brush for this cell, and then we're going to switch to a smaller flat brush for the next cell. See how I'm going to turn it on its side, make it tiny, and then flip it this way and pull it that way to fill in that larger opening. And then I'm going to take everything that's on my brush, all that paint, and I'm going to fill in anywhere I don't know that got the fullest amount of paint. And that is a completely filled in cell, and it's perfect. Now I'm going to switch to a smaller one, and I'm going to go in with my favorite 10/0 flat brush. This baby is awesome. So I just rinsed it, and as I wiped it on the cosmetic wipe, you see how it's got this great little flat brush, but it's almost like to a point. So see this opening right here? It's a 13, but it's very small. I'm going to go in here, and I can get the smallest cells with this little flat brush, because I can pull it straight towards me like a flat brush, or I can put it on its side and make the tiniest, thinnest lines you've ever seen, and I have super control. So that's why this one is available in a set, but also available individually. And I will use this a lot throughout an entire painting. So I'm going to skip over to this one, this little cell right here, while I've got this brush. And I'll do one more just to show you how tiny of a cell you can do with that guy, and how perfect and quick and easy was that. Let's go ahead and do this one. I'm sorry, while I've got it and I've got paint on it. Now I'm just going to flip him over and fill that little cell in too. All that same amount of paint that was on the brush. And that's it. And so you can see how quickly the flat brushes fill in and how much control you have with them. So amazing tools. If you're not used to flat brushes, they are so amazing to get used to. At first, I was not that great with them, and then the more I use them, the more I love them. So I'm going to go to another flat brush. I'm going to pull out a smaller size. And once I've shown you all of them, I will start working with the spotter brushes before we go into the blending brushes. So I'm going to use the 2/0 flat brush. Now when I cleaned this one just now, I always rinse my brushes before I start. This is actually a pretty small brush for this big opening right here of number 13. I can even go in here with this tiny cell number 13 and do that one. Let me show you real quickly before I go to the bigger one. And I'm standing back so far. I hope I can see what I'm doing here. I can outline a little bit with it first and then fill in. And all it takes is a little bit of movement and rotation on the brush to get the angle I need. And I hope I can see what I'm doing enough to make sure I'm filling in the right cell. And there we go. So that bigger brush filled in that little tiny 13 right there. So let me go in with that same brush and let's start filling in this larger number 13. Now I'm just going to get more paint on it this time. And if you get too much paint before you go, oh my gosh, I have too much, I will put the paint, the majority of the paint on the center, and then I can take it and start putting it on the outside of the line. And I really want to put some flow aid in this right now. This paint is too thick, and I definitely need to thin it down. So a lot of people will ask, how do you know if you need a diluted flow aid or regular flow aid? And I've done an entire video about that. And I'm going to show you here in a second. Let me stop. So before I paint any more using this paint, I'm going to fix this. I have not added any flow aid or diluted flow aid to this particular paint yet, because this is the first time I'm using this color. So I'm going to go in with straight flow aid and add, a lot of people say, you're not supposed to add it straight. Well, you know what? These kind of paints are a lot different than normal acrylic paints and the tubes and whatever. So I'm going to add quite a bit of that straight flow aid. And then I'm going to go in with just a couple of drops of the diluted flow aid that I already have mixed in this bottle. And then I'm just going to stir that up with my stainless steel stir sticks over here. And I'm not going to do this over the painting, so I'm going to move it, but because I will have this everywhere. But I'm going to stir this up and I'll come back and show you the consistency. So that is way better. It's like almost like a melted milkshake. It's a whole lot better and easier to paint with. So once I start painting, you'll see the difference probably. And it might even could use a little bit more flow aid. And I'll know here in a minute. It's got some more movement to it. Definitely an improvement. If it drags and it makes the brush look like it's leaving brush strokes, it needs more flow aid. See, right now it's still doing that. Then it needs some more liquid added to it. So let me add a little bit more. And you notice it's not losing any opacity in the paint. I'm still getting the same vibrant paint color here. I just need more movement. Thickens up after it's been sitting if it doesn't have enough. So if I use this color again, I'm going to make sure I add some more and stir it in. So let me use the largest of the flat brushes, even though I don't have a section right here that's really going to work perfectly for this larger brush, except for maybe 24 or 27. So I'm going to go ahead, and even though I'm going to be working back over here, I'll let this one dry before I come back and get my hands in this. I'm going to go ahead and do this number 24 to show you this larger flat brush. And a lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, that's not a very big opening. Are you really going to put that big brush in there? Absolutely, I am, because that is how I roll. I ain't scared. Okay, so let's go in here and start with this big brush. And you're looking, you're going, oh my goodness, no, she's not. Yes, I am. And the only scary part for me is that I am so far back that I'm like worried about lines and getting, over the lines. But normally I take bigger brushes and I go into small areas all the time because I'm close enough to where I can really see what I'm doing. But I'm going to use my bad boy on its side here. So you probably saw me get a little carried away and even do that little tiny cell with that huge brush, but that's how I do. If I have a brush in my hand and I see it open, I'm like, oh, let me go ahead and do that one. And I don't even think about the fact that the brush is huge. So, or too small for that, you know. So that is how you can use a huge brush in that little tiny opening, because I turned it on its side. I did the straight line first. I came down with it, brought it straight down, and then I just turned it. So you learn to manipulate the flat brushes. So that is basically the tutorial part for using the flat brushes. Now let's talk about the spotter brushes. Most of us are familiar and very comfortable with the spotter brushes, which are the rounded brushes. These spotter brushes are a must-have. So I'm a huge believer, and this is not a sales tactic, you guys, but I'm a huge believer in having the flats and the spotters. They are both must-haves. They work beautifully together. You need flats for larger areas. If you've seen the streaky paints video that I did about tips to avoid streaky paints, you will understand why flat brushes are imperative to your collection. So that is why you need those. But for these little areas, these are why you need the tiny spotter brushes. Now this is, like I said, the largest of the spotters in the mini detail set. So let me go ahead and start painting some of this area. Let's get started. Now I want to mention, I know I'm always adding little tips and tricks when I'm painting, and that is why I like to do these kinds of videos once in a while where I do a paint with me type of session, because I remember things as I'm working. So for those of you who say, my paintbrush is fray, my paintbrushes, they're not holding up. And I'm not talking about my particular paintbrushes, I'm talking about paintbrushes in general. One of the things that I've probably never mentioned in any other video is that if you do not have the right consistency in your paint and it's not creamy enough, you'll notice that your paint drags and your paintbrush looks dry as it's moving across your surface, especially if you have a sandpaper textured gesso. So what's happening is that's actually putting extra fraying on your bristles. And no, I've never mentioned this probably in the 2 years that I've been doing these hobby videos, but the more fluidity your paint has, the better your bristles are going to hold up over time. And it makes sense because you're not tugging and dragging across this surface. So keep that in mind. So if your paint is not creamy, because I just added more Flow Aid. Yesterday you saw me add Flow Aid and get this creamy. But when I opened it up, it had pretty much absorbed, and people will say, well, how do you know how much more to add? I just get it to a certain consistency, and you see it's creamy now. It is not liquidy, but it's creamy, and it's gonna glide across this canvas, and it's gonna feel right. And I guess it's one of those things that you get the feel of it, and then you know. And that may take experience. But if I use this paintbrush and it feels dry and leaves brush marks, that's not enough Flow Aid or diluted Flow Aid. And I have done a video on Flow Aid, just nothing but Flow Aid. So make sure you check that out, okay? This is number 13 because I had a lot of 13s here. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna pick some of the larger openings and I'm gonna start filling them in. Here's a large one here. And I am working at a distance, so you guys, if I'm missing some lines, if I'm not up super close, please overlook it because I really can't see close enough. And if I work close, I'm very meticulous, but it's okay because when I come in beside it, I clean things up. And when I'm working close, I'll touch it up. But now you notice I hold my brush a little further out, and I will turn and get all the paint as I work. Even though it's a pointed brush, you'll notice I will flatten it out to smooth the surface, just like I would if it were a flat brush. That's how you get that texture of a pointed brush out of a cell, so it doesn't look like it's got the stroke marks in it. Flatten your brush like a flat brush and get those stroke marks out. Now there looks like there's a little line of another color that comes through there, but there's a 13 here. Now I can go in with this larger round brush, as long as I don't get too much paint, and come in here lightly, less pressure, less paint is gonna go down, right? So I'm gonna lift my brush. I'm not putting a lot of pressure, so I don't apply too much paint. I'm gonna take my brush and come back over here and get some of that extra paint, use it as my palette, and then I'm just going to rotate this around. I probably could use even more flow aid in this paint because I'm noticing it's dry, and I can fill in even with this larger brush. It depends on how you're using your brush. So if I'm pushing too hard, I can fill in this whole small cell with too much paint because I'm pushing too much, I'm putting too much, I'm applying too much. See this tiny little 13 right here? Now it actually is a tiny area there and it's small there, but it opens up into a bigger space. Now I have a 2/0 in my hand, and a lot of people would go to a smaller brush. I'm going to show you how I would use this brush and fill this in. I've got quite a bit of paint here on these bristles. I'm not applying a lot of pressure to fill in the smallest area. I'm barely touching. I'm going to pull so I don't get a lot of paint there, almost like barely touching and stroking lightly to get it into the larger section, and then I'm going to apply the pressure and push down. And you see how I'm applying the paint that is on that bristle and filling in, and then applying more pressure to get it to fill it in completely. And that's how you use a larger round brush to fill in a tiny section. So you're not switching out brushes constantly. If you've got this one in your hand, you can fill in all the larger or even the smaller size 13 cells with the same brush. Saves you time. All right, now let's switch down to the 3/0. Now you'll notice the 3/0 is a little bit smaller. Let's compare the two so you can see the difference. And so we're stepping down in size a little bit. And let me get this. I made a mess when I used flow aid here a second ago. I did put some in the well here in the top of the paint pot. So let's go in, and you notice we've got a really nice fine point on this 3/0. Let's go into a very small 13 here. Oh, here's a nice one. And I'm super far back. See if I can get in here. I like to outline a little bit on these smaller cells and then come in and just fill it out. And you see how beautifully that works. And like I say again, the lighter the pressure, the less you're going to have too much paint in that cell. Do you see how nicely that point holds up and it doesn't bend, or it's not so long that I don't have control of it? I have to say I'm in love with these brushes, and I know that I came up with them, but it almost sounds like I'm being, egotistical about it, but I'm really in love with them. I'm like, I don't know what we did without them before. I think we bought all the brushes on the planet. That's going to be all of that particular brush. But you see how that works. Now that brush looks super long because I've got paint at the end, but these are really great for control. There we go. You can see it's not as long as it looked there a second ago. Now I did want to point out too that the bristles that I chose for these brushes, they are a nylon blend. They're synthetic, but I chose this two-tone type of bristle because they hold up better and resist fraying better than any other bristles that I tried. So there was a purpose in everything that I did, and every aspect of the bristle and the handle and everything was designed for the paint by number enthusiast and artist. I mean, every single aspect. So I think you'll recognize that as you use them. I hope you do anyway. All right, so this is the 5/0. Now you'll notice it looks a lot thinner now that I've gotten it rinsed. And this one is super nice for little tiny areas. Let's go in with this one. It's got this line here. It's a little longer than what I would use this 5/0 for. But we're gonna do it just to show you how you can line and how nice that line can be. And applying that pressure or lifting up that brush makes all the difference in the world. And you guys notice, and I've said this in a lot of videos, and a lot of people are new going to be watching this, but I always paint in I stroke in one direction, and that way I am not destroying the bristles on my brushes. I lift, I'm not scrubbing back and forth. You don't see it, but I lift my brush and I place it back down. It's a quick movement, so you don't see that, but I pull down, lift, pull down, lift, and that way there is no scrubbing motion on this gesso. Even if there wasn't gesso, I would do it that way, but that is what helps maintain these brushes forever. Plus my cleaning process, which I've explained, and I will be going through another video soon about how to clean properly. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in this little section. But you can see that point, even though it looks long, I still have very good control of this point. Now this one is another one that I probably wouldn't even have thought about going in. I just saw it with this, smaller brush, but I'm going to, because it does have some, odd shapes to it. So let's go ahead and outline it. And we can use it for this longer section. And then this thinner, and I'm hoping I got that wholesale. If I'm painting another color, I'm not going to worry about it because I can't see. But it's all about the pressure you apply and how much, whether you push down or lightly apply that pressure. And it's always going to be about the consistency of your paint too. Okay, now finally, let's go in with the 20/0, the tiny baby sized super detail. This is the one that I added to this set at the last minute because I had people saying, please, please, please put in a tiny little brush. And that's where this one came from. And now this one will be an individual one that will be for sale, in addition to being in the set, because people loved it so much, they requested that it be an individual brush. So that's in production. Ashlyn will be adding it to the site as soon as it's ready, which hopefully will be before Christmas. So right here is a tiny little 13. Now this little guy, I think actually goes up in here, so it's bigger than I thought it was. But I wanted to show you, even though she is small, she is mighty. So you can see how I still have control, even though that is a tiny, skinny little point. You see how much control I have. I do not push down. I do not, smash my brush in there because I don't have to. And I can get these tiny detail areas with no problem. Outline, fill in, very little pressure, and the tiniest little details are filled quickly. Now I'm doing this at real time, not just to talk through, but also to show you how quickly you can paint if you have the right tools. Now this one is kind of a small one, and it's got an interesting shape to it. Okay, so you can see how that beauty works in the tiniest little areas and why people want tons of that one. So that is why that one will be available individually. Now this one, you know, I've said is my favorite. And I say favorite, that was before the flat brush set actually arrived, and this is the one I had to work with the most. So see this number 13 here? I'm gonna fill this one in because that is the way I would probably be doing this painting if I was sitting here and the only set I had was the mini detail set. I would be filling in 90% of these number 13s with this flat brush. And I'm gonna show you because I've been talking about showing everybody for a while. And I know I did a few earlier, but I'm gonna go ahead and do this before we start blending. Because this is a larger cell, I start with a pretty decent amount of paint on this brush. And again, I'm kind of standing back and I hate it because I can't really see edges. But I outline as I go, and I'm able to get around what I like to call the organic edges, which are the curved edges, just as easily as I can the pointed edges and the flat edges, no problem. Now, because this is a larger area, technically I could have gone in with a larger flat brush, but assuming this is all you have is the detail brush set, this little bad boy is the bomb. And you see how fast and beautifully he filled that in, okay? So let's go in with a smaller cell using the same brush. See this little tiny 13 right here? I'm gonna make sure my brush is loaded, not tons of paint, but let's see. Now I'm gonna go in sideways. So I'm gonna outline using the side of the brush and then pull it towards me. And that one's done. Like super easy. Love this brush. Let's find another one right here's a tiny one. Taking what's on the brush, filling it in. Easy, okay. And I'm still taking what's on this brush. This one I can't even see very well, but it looks like there's a little hook down in here. You guys, your eyes are probably twitching because I'm all over the place. I can't see. I'm gonna barely touch into the paint. I don't want to get too much because I really don't see lines as well as I need to, but it looks like this one goes way in over here. So I'm using this kind of sideways and pulling it this way. But if I had a lot of paint to fill in, I would be using it this way, like here. That's a number 13 also, and it kind of goes down there. So let's go ahead and do that one. All right, so that's all I'm gonna do with that. Let's go ahead and work on blending next. All right, so now let's move to the blending brushes and blending my choppy face.